or the 19th of April, and that's the end of the afternoon, and I'm taking a, I don't know what you call this, not a lunch, but a break, I don't know. And since I have cleaned my room overwhelmingly, because it's a day-to-day struggle to reorganize, etc., because there is constant movement, etc., but the overall tendency, I have now cleaned my room. It's been a few weeks already, but for me it means, I will not detail, but my room is kind of ordered. I have distributed my daily books. I encourage you, whenever you watch this, wherever you are, in your language, whatever language you speak, there are short, small books to encourage people to be more responsible. They explain the good arguments, like if you have food supplies at home, in periods of times of inflation, you can eat at lower prices if you have bought the food earlier. So if you buy at any moment, you are kind of protected against inflation in a longer term, because you can eat in the future what you bought in the past, which in the future will be the past, but you will have bought. If you buy for the future, in the future, when you eat what you bought in the past, you will eat something that you bought when the prices were the prices of the past. And if in the future, which is now now the present, in comparison when you will be eating what you bought in the past, if the trend is inflation, and over the past century, Ron Paul talks about this in End the Fed. Since central bankings have been implemented, there has been a continuous inflation, which is kind of made more or less invisible in normal circumstances, because prices, they either they rise slowly and people do not perceive this, or they rise, but it's kind of compensated by the increasing technological advances. So basically, here that's logic and not empiricism. Precisely, the Austrian in economics, they understand this. Prices can be more or less stable or have a very low level of inflation, but it's not because of the central banking policy. It's in spite of, namely, sometimes the standards of living and the purchasing power can increase, not because of the policies of the central banks, but in spite of these policies, because the destructive effects of quantitative easing, low interest rate, artificially lowered interest rate, fractional reserve, etc. The negative, here I will not make a lecture to explain what these terms mean. I have given enough references, Mises Institute, Per Ballon, Jeff Deist, Ron Paul, Rothbard, Hopper, Mises, etc. Yeah. So the destructive economic policies of the central planners, they are counterbalanced in a way by the increasing and incredible technological innovation, which increases purchasing power because it increases productivity with the same quantitative input of labor, usually, through technological increase in productivity, the number of output is increased, which means that the standards of living rise. So people, most of the time, they do not perceive the constant inflation because it is counterbalanced by a tremendous increase in productivity, which makes products cheaper, but without the artificially created inflation, they would be even cheaper. So people would have even better standards of living. Formulated simply, that's Austrian economics, usually relatively good results economically, whatever, in terms of employment, growth, prosperity, whatever, they do not occur because of whatever policies the state implements or the central banks, but in spite of, which means without the intervention of the state or the central banks, which are kind of in league together, the economic result would be even better. But it cannot be proven empirically, it has to be logically deduced, and that's what the Austrians do. And the manipulators in the realm of economics, they just pick together random, not randomly, but they assemble empirical data in a very confusing way, and they justify whatever policies is implemented by politicians, but there is no reasoning, there's no coherent structure, the ordering. That's what the Austrian in economics, they understand. Yeah. I wanted to make a video because that's kind of my pause. I have distributed 2 books today with supplies, and I've picked up the trash. Yeah, for at least 20 minutes, I would say. I've been doing this almost daily for at least 6 months, maybe 7 months. Yeah, but I wanted to talk about science and negativity. I appear sometimes very negative to ordinary people because my view is scientific a lot of times, and science, because it is the realm of the universal, in a way it is the negative of the singulars, but the universal contains the singular under itself. In scientific language, every singular physical event, the movement of objects in the case of mechanics, heat, temperature, in terms of thermodynamics, the meteorological events, clouds, rain, rainbow, wind, etc. These are always, or lightning, these are singular physical meteorological events, but they are governed by universal laws. These are just singularization of a universal meteorological process in the case of meteorology, but and every falling leaf or object, a stone, a can, whatever falling object, that's a singular event, but it obeys universal determination of gravity, one might say, which are valid everywhere. In the realm of economics, every failing business is a singular case of universal laws of economics, and there are causes, reasons, which make some businesses fail and others succeed, which can be intelligibly understood, which can be intellectually grasped. Yeah. And when someone talks like a scientist, it appears very negative to ordinary people with an ordinary level of consciousness, because this is disconnected from their perception, because most people, they live in the realm of the singulars, one might say, which is the manifestation of the universal, but they do not elevate their thoughts to the grasping of the universal. Yeah. And for a very long time, for many years actually, I have believed that I have devoted myself to the universal in a way for many reasons. First, because science is kind of interesting. Second, because I was tremendously impressed and influenced by the writings of Hegel, and it set very high standards in terms of abstraction, rigor, systematicity, etc., etc. And then because of my religious views, I already said this, but I understand in a way that I have believed for a very long time that my empirical self, me, Luca, was some sort of an embarrassment because of my limitations, because of my my flaws, because of my my human, all too human aspect, and I tried to erase myself empirically by devoting myself to the universal, to that which is true, independently of my singularity. If I spoke, if I expressed the laws of economics or physics or mathematical formulas while understanding them, of course, but it's not if, but when anyone, but here I will speak as a self, if anyone, or when me as an individual, if I express views on any scientific topic which are true, they go beyond me. But most people, they are not used to a scientific mindset, and I have tried for a very long time. It hasn't been the case over the past few months, but for a very long time to erase my singular self completely, because I thought this was kind of shameful, embarrassing, etc. But in a way, the Hegelian view that I have tended maybe to misinterpret is that precisely the singular and the universal, they reciprocally determine one another in a way. The singular exists within the universal, but the universal exists for the singular. It is man as a thinking agent which can reach the universal. That's what the boring German metaphysician says in many of his writings. But it's true. But yeah. And here, that's the psychoanalytic. I understood this last year. The empirical, here it's a little bit embarrassing, but the empirical world is, there are aspects which are not pure in a way. There is a, very simply, there is a dirt, and there is a it's rough. There are aspects which are rough, dirty. It's sometimes it's incoherent. Here I talk about the basic going outside. It's not, how should I explain this? It's either it's rough in a sense that it's not ordered rigorously geometrically, or it's dirty in the case of modern cities, especially in the West. There are flaws. Things are not perfect, and it can bring disturbance to a certain mindset, because ideally we would like things to be perfect, perfectly ordered, perfectly beautiful, perfectly right in a sense of straight, etc., etc. So yeah, the world is not. It's partly flawed in a way, rough, flawed, dirty. Sometimes it's a little bit not twisted, but a little bit. What is the opposite of straight? Not in terms of sexuality, in terms of geometry. Yeah, it's yeah. And for a mathematical mind, a scientific mind, it's a formula. It's more elegant. Yeah, it's more elegant than the infinite variety of and the instability and the ever-changing aspect of the natural world. Here it means physical. That's the classical idea in aesthetics. The classical ideal is pure, enlightened, ordered, measured, balanced, harmonious in terms of proportion. There are no excesses. That's the Apollonian ideal of Nietzsche, which was embodied already in classical Greece, but then revived in the 17th century in art. Yeah, and the opposite is kind of the Barocco. It has various recurring instances in the history of European aesthetics, but that's the Dionysian in the Nietzschean language. That's Barocco after the Renaissance or during and after the Renaissance. Then the Romantic in the 18th, 19th century. There are these conflicting tendencies between a clear or clarity, enlightenment, order, structure, etc., and a more rough, expanding, outburst, etc. And I have sometimes kind of both aspects, but I have had the tendency to be very Apollinian in a way, which the problem is that it can be dry, in a sense of kind of boring and too rigorous and rigid. And here, I'm in a good mood. What do I prefer between classical aesthetics and Barocco in the 16th, 17th century? Classical aesthetics. Between Enlightenment, ideals, values, and Romantic. I tend to prefer the Romantic in terms of aesthetics, ideals, etc. But the Enlightenment ideals are good as well, but here I tend to prefer the Romantic aspect. Between classical aesthetics and Romantic aesthetics. Here it's very difficult to choose because I love really both. And the Romantics, the historical Romantics, the German poets, the philosophers, writers, etc., and the French and the English, they all usually loved classical Greek art. The German Romantics, at the end of the 18th, early 19th century, they loved and they admired classical Greek art and the classical ideal of Greek, although they were Romantics. So it's not contradictory in a way, but yeah. So I have had the tendency to get interested and to invest a lot of time, effort, energy over the years in the pure abstractions because it's not tainted. Yeah, tainted would be the word. I use the word dirty or flawed or a little bit not straight. Tainted. The empirical world is partly tainted, and that's why there is this ideal of logical purity for metaphysicians already in the days of Plato. That's already the criticism that Plato made of the empirical world. It's not as ordered or clear or pure as the realm of ideas. Yeah. And when I speak, I no longer do this because being interacting with empirical people has helped me understand and realize that my abstract metaphysics was really negative, appeared really negative to others because it's so disconnected, so abstract, that most people don't enjoy this. So I have improved. There's a French expression which says mettre de l'eau dans son vin, which literally means to put water in your wine. I don't drink wine, but basically it means to dilute a little bit wine or alcohol with water to lower down the intensity, one might say. So I'm willing to do this, to give up on really the dry, boring and negative, purely abstract aspect. But the other opposite of really people who do not think at all. I mean, it's strictly speaking, it's impossible because every human thinks and expresses himself through language, but does not reflect, one might say. For me, that's also very negative. And it's not a question of intelligence, because my empirical encounters, I encounter, not necessarily by speaking, but the people that I'm surrounded with when I move around, they usually have a high level of intelligence relatively to most other people, because in a country with a relatively high IQ or a very high IQ in comparison with most countries, the average level, even if these are people who are less intelligent, because that's a statistical distribution, so in the street or when I briefly talk randomly with people, I don't know if they are above or below average, but the overall level is quite high. And so it's not only a question of intelligence, but I have noticed, and it's true, but when we read comments on the internet under certain videos, the average person who comments, again, the level of intelligence in terms of IQ is relatively high, because in order to have access to the internet, to write correctly, etc., it's relatively high. Here it means, I don't know exactly, but at least I would say 90 maybe, or yeah, relatively high in comparison with a lot of people on this planet. Yeah, so it's not only a question of intelligence, but I've noticed that a lot of people who are either below average in terms of intelligence or even in the middle or even slightly above, they do not reflect, they do not think about the world. They live in the world on a day-to-day basis. Maybe they have long-term plans for their retirement or their children or their projects for finding a partner, etc. But they do not think beyond their singular self, precisely. So my excesses has been an excess of universality, one might say, in a really purely abstract, dry, boring aspect. But a lot of people, that's the other opposite. They live only their singular life, which I cannot reproach them, but it becomes problematic when they do not consciously seek the universal, and then they make decisions which are not always adequate, one might say, but who have collective consequences, and that's kind of problematic. To illustrate, I understand that people complain about economic problems, but what is a little bit frustrating from the perspective of a scientist is that people complain about the consequences, the causes of which they do not understand, and most of the time they do not even seek to understand. And here, Mr. Deist, I've been reading a little bit of this book each day. He makes very relevant remark, a very excellent Mr. Deist. He says somewhere, I read the passage because it's an extract from a book published, from an article published on Mises.org, so that's public, available, it's just reprinted. Welcome to Post-Persuasion America. I will not read the entire article, but I've just read this earlier in the afternoon. It's really excellent. It's just 3 pages long. Yeah. Maybe it's still available. This article originally appeared January 1st, 2021 on Mises.org. Welcome to Post-Persuasion America. Yeah, he's explained that a lot of social media turn people into idiots because of the short attention span. All of it, he talks about the social media, all of it leaves us numb and exhausted. Our attention spans suffer. We slowly lose our aptitude for deep thinking and serious reading. We attempt to replace wisdom and understanding with data and facts. But because information is so abundant and readily available, it becomes worth less and less. Information is cheap, literally, etc., etc. And here he says, if someone today wants to read Austrian Economics, but to read any topic actually, for example, they can do so at virtually no cost other than time. They don't even need to leave home. The smartphone in their palm holds a lifetime of reading and learning in just this one discipline. No physical books, no college, no tuition, and no librarian required. So why don't more people do so? The short answer is most people are beyond persuasion. I tend to disagree. My work has consisted in precisely trying to convince, I don't like the word persuade, but to convince those who are beyond persuasion through the use of pop culture. Yeah, at least most or some of them. I haven't given up on this ideal actually. But otherwise, I agree with most of what Mr. Deist says. And here he says also something very interesting. Yeah, anyone who wants to change their mind can find a whole universe of alternative viewpoints online, but very few people do, especially beyond a certain age. Yeah. That's kind of problematic because the Western world has really been dumbed down, and there are a lot of old people, and it's difficult for older people to change their mind. It's possible because truth is identical for all, but yeah, it is kind of difficult. That's why the revolutionary, they focus on the youth usually. But my view, my ambition is not to become a classical revolutionary. I don't want... that's the reason why I made videos on home economics. Ideally, I'd like to talk to everyone, because truth precisely is the same for all. But yeah, my revolution is not about going in the street and cutting off people's head with a guillotine, like they did. The English did this to their king in the 17th century, then the French. My ideal is partly a home revolution, namely to encourage more and more people. That here I'm talking about my videos on home economics. The greatest amount of people possible to revolutionize themselves. Of course, it's not enough, but I am very skeptical about the masses. Yeah, so the idea that there can be change by changing the people in power, I don't believe this, because the problem, of course the people in power, they are kind of problematic, but the problem is the entire people within the society, which allows all its institutions to rot and to decay, which has been the case for a very long time in Western countries. So I really don't believe in politics, in a sense that these are not a change of laws, no matter how well designed they might be, who will be sufficient to change the situation. I really don't believe in politics. Not only the modern politicians, but actually in politics as such. That's why I identify with the that's one of the reasons why I identify with the Americans, because America was, until the 1960s, a post-political country to the greatest extent possible. Yeah, and that's why the Austrians and the libertarians, they are kind of non-polit. I mean, they are politicized, but their ideal is to get rid of politics. It's a waste of time, because politics is just coercion and theft and manipulation and scheming. And here, my view I wanted to talk about this. Precisely UPS, the universal, the singular, because I was watching it's still on my computer, a video by Mr. Deist with other guests, and some people in the comment, they talked about the need to have a personal leader. But precisely here, that's my problem. I don't like politics because from a philosophical standpoint, precisely the truth is universal, and a politician, here that's kind of my a little bit arrogant Platonic self. I kind of agree with Plato. The kings should be philosophers, or the philosophers should be kings. But yeah, I know that it's partly, I would say, dangerous, because yeah, the problem with the ideal of the philosopher-king is the technocratic problem. So the technocracy is the degeneracy of the Platonic ideal of the philosopher-king, like democracy is the degeneracy of the Republican ideal, and oligarchy is the degeneracy of the monarchy ideal, or the aristocratic ideal. No. Monarchy, good. Dictatorship, tyranny, that's the degenerative aspect. Aristocracy, good. Oligarchy, that's the degenerative aspect. Republic, good. Democracy, that's the degenerative form of a republic. And here, if we invent, one might say, another political way of ruling, the philosopher-king, it's partly, actually that would be an aristocracy of knowledge, wisdom. Yes, so that's partly an aristocratic ideal, a monarchic ideal, a republican ideal if it's a republic of enlightened people. Yeah, the degenerative aspect would be the modern technocratic bureaucracy, the rule of the experts. Yeah. Here I will make a sad remark. Because of my personal story, living almost completely isolated between 2009 and 2019, and then with very few social contacts ever since 2019, so I no longer live completely isolated, but I have few social interactions. Nonetheless, a lot more than previously, but a few nonetheless. So, because of my personal history of social isolation, I struggle to envision why people might like me as an individual, why they might appreciate me. And here, my personal story, my teenage romance. Of course, the person that I loved was wonderful, but another aspect which was wonderful in my love story is that I never expected, when I was 15, that a girl would be interested in me, and I never expected that she would be so wonderful. So that's part of an aspect that I loved her because she was wonderful, but maybe I loved her even more. Here, maybe that's a little bit of pride, I don't know, but I loved her even more because she loved me. Whoa, you love me, that's amazing. Yeah, it was an aspect of this, yeah. But here, that's kind of sad because yeah. Because actually unconsciously, or even at some moment consciously, I have tried to erase myself as a singular individual, because of the aforementioned reason, scientific ideal plus the embarrassment, the flaws, my problem with the empirical world, my social isolation, my religious problems, I might say. Yeah, but yeah, also here I will make an intelligent remark. I have understood. I have been deluded in a way by the grotesque aspect of the caricature of well, some caricatural views regarding the problem of negativity, one might say. I have understood over the past few months that by interacting with empirical people, that precisely what appears to them as negativity, which can be in a way evil, is it's not always the case. Negativity can be good, but intelligence can appear, and actually does appear, as negative to a lot of people when it's excessive, and I understand why in a way. And my view, I will conclude with this. I love the innocence of people being just happy and joyful. I really do. So in a way, I appreciate when people are not stupid, no, but are kind of ignorant. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. People who are just joyful and who do not worry too much about all the problems, because when you do, which is my case, you become a little bit insane because you see the problems everywhere. So people who really are just innocent in a sense that it doesn't mean that they are completely good, but they may have their little flaws or vices which are kind of irrelevant, but they just have a not always joyful. It's not about being happy for the sake of being happy, but who have a positive outlook on life, one might say. I appreciate this, of course, but the problem, here I speak in a normal level of consciousness, the problem is that in the modern West, there really are serious problems, structural problems, which are caused by really, one might, collective stupidity. There's no other word. The problem, I will not list all the problems, but how should I explain this? What I'm trying to express is that ideally, one might say, I would have no problem with a lot of people in a society being a little bit ignorant, naive, one might say. Naive, yeah, naive. I wouldn't say, dumb is not what I think. Ignorant, partly, but naive, yeah. No problem. That's kind of good. You don't want all the people to know about all the problematic aspects of existence. So as long as they can be naive or innocent, that's good. But the problem is that if it becomes so widespread that there are no longer sane, realistic, lucid people to kind of protect the naivete and the innocence of most people, it becomes problematic, because then the naivete turns into collective stupidity in a way, in the negative sense. That's why Ron Paul is some sort of a hero, because he's negative but in a good sense. Ron Paul, that's positive negativity, because he tells people The social system is unsustainable. We are being robbed by the banking cartel. The politicians are corrupt. So he awakens people in kind of a rough way, but without being excessive. He's lucid without being cynical. What do I say? Yeah, lucidity without cynicism. That's the ideal in a way. But yeah, but the problem is that I formulate this differently. Childlike innocence, even for adults, is kind of good if it's genuine in the sense that people who, that's maybe the romantic ideal, a little bit delusional, but it's a good delusion. So childlike innocence is good even for adults if there are adults who are lucid, clear-minded, to preserve the possibility of this innocence in a way. But the problem in the modern West is that there are no more adults, or very few. People like Ron Paul, but they are not very numerous, or the libertarians, or the intelligent conservative, but there are very few people like this. So if there are intellectual children with no adults to watch over them, they get deceived by manipulators, or they collectively become insane, and that's more or less what happens. Because here, ideally I'm on the side of the people, but here people in a specific sense, really the working people, not the underclass, and not the ideally, yeah, I'm a, I would say I'm a right-wing, no, I'm not a right-wing populist, but I'm an aristocratic populist. That's not right-wing populism. The right-wing populist, he tries to stir the people, follow me against the elite, etc. The aristocrat, it's a little bit different. He has good intentions toward the people, but he wants the people to know there are class distinctions, not in terms of economics, but in terms of nobility. Excuse me, I'm an aristocrat. I love you, dear people, but there has to be distinctions. The right-wing populist, well, you know, it's a little bit less bad than the left-wing populism, but it's still populism in a negative sense. The classical aristocrats, he did good to the people because he did not care about the people through philanthropy, etc. Or maybe he did, but not through. The aristocrat was too busy working for himself to care about the people, and the people, when the aristocrats were competent, it was more or less okay. They went about their own business. Yeah, it was some sort of a harmonious view, but then, of course, that's a little bit idealized. But for here, more seriously, for more than 1,000 years, for hundreds of years, it was okay for most people to live under an inegalitarian regime in terms of title and nobility, etc. They had no resentment against the aristocrat as such. That's a disease of modernity. The aristocrat, if they really are the best, it's not always the case, of course, but if they really are the best, the people, here it means the lower, it's not derogatory, the lower in terms of capability, etc., they should respect the better. That's just a healthy hierarchy within society. In a sense, egalitarianism really is a social disease and a psychological disease. Yeah. yeah, that's what I had to say. And yeah. What I mean by aristocratic populism is, another way of formulating this, when the people and the aristocrats, they both agree implicitly that politics is a waste of time, waste of resources, waste of energy. Each has to do its own business in a way. Yeah, that's what I mean. Right-wing populism is trying to politicize the people. Aristocratic populism is the opposite, trying to de-politicize the people. That's what I've been trying to do, and that's what I will still try to do as long as I can, or as long as I have to de-politicize society, not through consumerism, dumbing down or whatever, but just to my strategy is very simple in a way. There are so many interesting things to study, either through observation, going outside, just looking at the world, walking in the forest, things which can be done with almost no economic investment. Walking in the forest, looking at the sky, studying the sky, while swimming in a natural lake, if people can do this, or whatever, or reading good books, or there are so many interesting things which can be done without money, that politics, it's a waste of time. And here I know the arguments of I've read this in the book by Mr. Deist. The people who say, oh, only the privileged can afford not to be politicized. But no, precisely, because I've understood this, but actually it's self-evident. There are so many problems which are caused structurally by politicians, which bring about waste of time, waste of money, waste of resources, destruction of health, destruction of psychology, destruction of society. Yeah, that yeah. I received this book today. Mr. Deist, Matthew, Segall, these are really people that I love, because I know that they are great, and I know that very few people know that they are great. So I will promote them, I will keep promoting them. I already have. I will keep doing so as long as I have to. Yeah. Maybe, because at this point I don't know, if I have the opportunity, I will have the works of Matthew Segall and Mr. Deist and others translated into French. I could translate them myself, but then there are the copyrights. But I have the intention, or I already intended to do so, to translate articles of the Mises.org into French, because they are freely available, they are public. And then here the article that I mentioned earlier, which is just 3 pages long. It's really excellent, and it's reprinted from Mises.org. So I will translate this, and I will distribute this to people who might be interested. Because here I will conclude with my universal. Mr. Deist is a singular individual who is very interesting. in a particular context, the modern United States, but his ideas are universal, and yeah. Okay, it's almost 5 p.m. I still have a lot of work to do. Actually, I have so many things I could say, so many videos, but I intend to do so as long as I have to, but or as long as I can. I have so many things to say. Actually, that's why I record these kind of videos, because while I still can talk more or less peacefully, I talk alone in front of my camera. It will not be published before probably a few weeks, but yeah. Just talking is some sort of a therapy. Yeah. No, I will conclude. I will conclude with my UPS. One of the reasons as well that I have been fanatically devoted to the universal is the idea that a man, here it means a masculine man, has to devote himself to something greater than himself. That's the S. Has to devote to the U. This is what idealism, not in the philosophical sense, but in the other meaning of the word, whether in art, politics, science, etc. Yeah. Maybe at some moment in this world or the next, I don't know. Whoever we are, we will be able to talk, or at least to know what everyone thought about everyone else, or what people believed. I don't know. Maybe that's at some moment that's the real God somewhere, somewhen, where maybe at some moment all individual viewpoints. I've been reading Fichte a little bit, but I already knew. But all individual viewpoints, they will be able to know what others have believed, maybe. If only all the good people that I think about, if only they knew all the good things that I've been thinking about them. And also, when others who are there, all the errors that I've made, not in terms of errors in the sense of lack of knowledge, maybe lack of I still do, but all the ludicrous things here, not in a good sense, but ludicrous in the sense of really a little bit crazy things that I've believed. It's partly comical, it's partly well, here I will make a remark, I will complain a little bit. Jeff Deist and Matthew Segall. I'm a little bit frustrated because I know that these are great people. Their writings are very interesting. Their videos are very interesting. I've been interested in them. Jeff Deist already in 2018, and Matthew Segall, I think I discovered him in 2019. So it's been more than 4 or maybe more than 5 years. But I have no one that I can talk to or talk about these people with. Because here that's kind of the problem. How many people, these people, I know the very high quality of their work and their view, but there are very few people, not only in France, not only in continental Europe, not only in the US, but anywhere, very few people who are interested in their work, although these are great books, great ideas, great videos. I understood this last year, probably at some moment, that people that I am spontaneously attracted to, these are just examples, but they have a very narrow audience. If I had the possibility, I would translate the conferences of Matthew Segall or the books of Matthew Segall in French. And whoever you are, when you watch this, whatever your language, you could do this as well. Yeah. Yeah, this is. I have so many things that I could do, but I have other things to do. But translating Jeff Deist or Matthew Segall in French, for instance, that would be a good idea. Because I will praise myself to conclude. I have a very bright eye to spot the rough diamonds or the shining diamonds which have not been noticed yet. In this sense, I trust my judgment. I know that the people that I have discovered here, discover means people that I know their ideas are excellent, but they are not very well widespread. I know that they are excellent. I have no doubt about this. So I'm very good at spotting unearthed jewels, rough diamonds, etc., etc. Yeah. I will stop the video here. I will keep working.